It's great to be able to spend some time today with Charles Scriven, who has got quite a history and a story, and the intent is particularly to talk to him today about issues of combating racism and how we can speak into equality in a meaningful and intentional way. Charles, um, it's been great to get to know you over the last couple of years. It's been really a blessing to me. So maybe you could share a little bit of what you're thinking with us all today.
All right. It has been a good experience in being a member, and that's one of the things a little peculiar to me. Within our tradition of fellowship, we have to what we call join the church. That is, then the church accepts you as a member. And I had asked Randy about it. How do you join the church? He said, you just come. And
We allow people to come and worship with us and be active in participation and membership if they want to regularize themselves as an Episcopalian. We have a class they take for that. But we feel that people should be allowed to explore the community and become and exercise ministry in the community. And there are some ministries that you have to be a confirmed Episcopalian. So you can be a member, financially support, vote at vestry meetings, and never be confirmed. But there are some things you could not do unless you were confirmed.
and what are those things you cannot do?
Okay, you cannot serve on vestry. You cannot administer the sacrament. So there are lay people with me every Sunday administering communion. You need to be confirmed to do that. And you need to be confirmed to represent the church on commissions and committees and at the diocesan level.
I see.
That doesn't mean your voice isn't valuable, though, and all of those things, because anyone can attend a vestry meeting, but to be a member of vestry and a voting member of vestry.
When you say vestry, what are we talking about?
That is our leadership team. That's 7 elected members from our congregation who serve with me in providing the direction of leadership in the parish.
All right. Well, it's the opposite within the Baptist tradition. You must be accepted by the fellowship before you can do anything, sing in the choir, or be an usher, be a member of any board. You have to ask for membership. And once we extend the right hand of fellowship, then you can participate within the ministries of the church. Now, there are some things that only the ordained clergy may do.
That's right.
But other than that, you have to ask for membership in the church. And once that's given, then you may sing in the choir, you may act as an usher, be a member of the trustee board, or whatever ministries in the church. But you have to get permission
to do that.
To do that.
Well, we take your pulse. Do you have a pulse? So you were intrigued by the diocesan decision to establish a committee to combat racism, because I know you have experienced a lot of that.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you think the church needs to be doing to establish legitimate equity?
I feel the church needs to know more about racism and the different forms of it. Sometimes racism, the screen is black.
That's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Sometimes racism is effected just simply by neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And A clear example of that is at our universities here. You have two universities here in town where they have neglected, or they will let Florida A&M do what they want to do as long as it does not infringe on anything at FSU. But at the same time, you're letting the university go down because you're letting them do. A very good example, I don't know whether you would remember, but the Board of Governors permitted the trustee board to select the president of the university. Now, that would have been unthinkable at FSU. Now, they ultimately got the man they wanted, but they did have a little, what they call, nationwide search. But at Florida A&M, they let the trustees who are selected to serve a limited period of time select the president. So what do? They got Mr. Robinson, who has been a long-time faculty member, someone they could control, so they selected him. But can you think of anybody saying the trustees of Florida State could have saved millions of dollars now? And ultimately they got the man they wanted, but they had to have some kind of show that they were looking nationwide. And if you might have remembered, they said that the president, Thrasher, would not have met the qualifications to be a member, to be the president, but they adjusted things because of the pressure and on the university to get him, but he would not have. So now, when you let a community such as A&M make those decisions, what are you doing? That's racism by neglect, because you would not have permitted that to happen at any of the other universities in the state.
So unpack that some more for me. Not that specific example, but how do you see this playing out in a day-to-day basis? Racism by neglect.
You are permitting actions within a community that you would not allow in another community. Racism can come from different angles, and in this situation, you will permit something to happen in one community that it'd be unthinkable in another.
So do you think that what's the motivation for that?
There is no motivation. That's the problem. You have your interest is in education. So why would you let substandard practices go on in one community that you would not have in another? In this one, you care about the people who are being affected by your decision. In the other one, you don't care at all. So you let anything go on.
But this is the black community that's being allowed.
Yeah. But you need to hold the black community to the same standards of behavior. You don't, just because it's the black community and you live in the white community, you let anything go on.
Boy, this is, yeah, I need you to talk more about this. This is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Uh, a good example would be I'm in charge of this particular district where policemen are to patrol. In this district, you can't let anything go on. But now, go across town in a black district, you'll have all kind of things going on.
That would not be acceptable here.
That would not be right. But but you do not have the power to control it. And those who are in charge, they don't care as long as it is not a part of their community. One of the things we did when I was a policeman in Jacksonville, and I'm writing a book about it, we would let prostitution, moonshine, and we call it bolita, being sold in your black community. Then the bribes and money, we would send something to the chief or maybe to the mayor for all of that to go on. But now you would not let the same thing go on in the white community. And the part about integration meant what? The same standards in your black community would be the same as your white, because you're not going to let your white kids' education be undermined because they are in a integrated situation. That was the thing. My wife taught 18 years in the first grade, and in the schools where she taught, they constantly didn't have supplies, books, and things. But once she got started teaching in a white school, she didn't know that all those things were available because they didn't have them in the black schools. And if some of the kids lost books at the end of the year, she would be required, or the parents would be required, to pay for books. But once she got into a white school and the kids lost books and things like that, that was no problem. They said, "Child, don't worry about that." And
but do you think the I want to go back to this reverse racism, because if a school like FAMU used the same protocol that FSU used, would it be possible that FAMU would have ended up with a Caucasian or an Asian president?
That would make no difference if as long as the same standards.
Exactly.
We're not looking for a black president. We're looking for a president, somebody to lead the university. But you wouldn't let the things that's going on at FAMU go on at FSU.
Exactly.
And that is discrimination.
Yeah.
That's racism. See, we've always talked about racism as something being direct, but racism comes by neglect.
Yeah.
And it's just as devastating. There's and in fact, I have a book of it called The New Jim Crow. You can't use the same methods in dealing with people today as you did before, when you just put up a sign say, no blacks served here. But you will set up standards that would permit less performance.
Yes.
So what's the difference? You are taking that same child who will be in 5 or 10 years a citizen who will be illiterate and functioning in a society.
So who can change this racism by neglect? Who can change the protocol at FAMU?
The people who are in charge are selecting those to serve. We are still on that level where we're fighting to get up.
Yeah.
But those who are in charge, they're selecting the people, and they select people who are incompetent that they can control. And I don't want to stay with Mr. Robinson, but I wrote several articles, and I finally went to see the editor at the Democrat, and I told him, I said, y'all have mistreated A&M. And he said, how? You will have editorial board or editorial comments about things that's going on at FSU, but when you see some things going on at A&M, you don't. He said, well, anything you have written, we are printing. I said, but I'm one person. I'm Charles Scriven. But if you call attention to a situation from a newspaper point, you can reach people. But it's simply about what you don't say that can hurt a community as well as what you say.
Do you think they're afraid to say something?
I think it's just a matter of I don't care, or what difference does it make?
Okay.
Yeah.
You see, I would have interpreted that possibly as being as being an outsider trying to speak into a community without the right to speak into the community. And I really appreciate the fact that you see this as racism by neglect. That in fact, that if they're going to keep the feet of the Board of Trustees at FSU to the fire, they need to keep the feet of the Board of Trustees at FAMU to the fire. That it's not a double standard. And that is, I mean, that I find that personally convicting, and I appreciate that.
They'll let things, I don't know whether you were here when Mangrum was here.
No.
But she came in as an outsider.
To FAMU, yes.
To FAMU. So, everybody who's been president of FAMU has been a FAMU graduate.
Yes.
Now, when they did a nationwide search, the search team recommended her. But she was not a FAMU graduate. Now, she would have stayed at FAMU if she had been a FAMU graduate or if she had been a member of AKA.
Yeah.
But she didn't have anything going for her. So when they started piling up on her and about her leadership, the main thing that was wrong with her was she did not graduate from A&M. And she came from an Ivy League school. And the strange thing about it, and this happens especially in black communities, there are blacks who will gang up because that black is from another side of town. And the trustee board paid her $400,000. In fact, they paid her in double. If they had let her stay another 6 months, they could have saved $400,000. But what did they do? They paid her, and then she had another year on her contract, and they also let her stay there. They had to pay her that. But now, would they have done the same thing at Florida State? No.
That's interesting. So what about the church? How do we how do we deal with this effectively in the church?
Well, the thing is, in Tallahassee, we don't have any churches that really stand up or stand out when you have some real issues. And the one church that Bethel here in Tallahassee, um, the it's a Republican was Republican control, and a lot of people didn't know, but that was a Republican headquarters. The pastor there was Gerald Bush campaign manager. Oh yeah.
But
Now
is it an integrated congregation?
no,
No. Are there any real integrated churches in Tallahassee?
I don't really know of any. I have been to the Episcopal Church downtown. Um, I don't really know of real any integrated churches. And with the exception of the minister at First Presbyterian, we don't have anybody who stands out and run the risk of being, quote, involved in issues within the community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't want to run that risk. Brant Copeland has been the only one. And the other thing is we don't have any black leadership that's involved in the church that has some influence really within the community.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't have that. C.K. Steele, you would not remember him. He died some years ago, and they got a statue of him downtown. He was with Martin Luther King in the basketball boycotts, but we don't have any real black leadership here in Tallahassee. Most of it has been compromised. And whenever you are offered a position, or whenever you have, Bethel got a nice tower there, and they got a nice building that Mr. Bush made possible. But what he did, he compromised the leadership in Tallahassee, and the Republican Party is very solid in our black Baptist church. And whenever you are connected with that church and the university, you got control of the strong voices in the black community.
So the flag that the church is, this is Jerry Smith speaking, the flag that the church is called to live its life under is the flag of the cross.
Right.
Issues of gender, issues of sexuality, issues of race, all come under the flag of the cross. And I'm not denying the need to speak to those other issues, but it seems to me, and I could be dead wrong on this, that the government and the church can legalize or regularize behavior, but only a legitimate relationship with Jesus can change the heart. So during Prohibition, both the government and the church were anti-alcohol, but didn't prevent people because the basic drive of the heart was to drink.
Right.
And you can legislate against gender inequity or racism or sexual orientation. You can legislate an environment where these things, people cannot be treated differently. But legislation is like washing the outside of the cup, Jesus' words.
Right.
We need to wash the inside of the cup. How can the church create an environment where people are introspective enough so that they begin to deal with the internal their racist behavior, their racist thinking?
Well, there's a conversion problem within the white community.
Thank you.
And whenever we look at issues and situations, and there are people who say they've been converted, there isn't. They have not been. If you get that man converted, some of the issues that you're talking about will be resolved. And I used to say this, and I don't remember who told me, but the minister was preparing his sermon, and his son kept bothering him, and he gave him a puzzle of the world and told him, said, go ahead and put that together and come back. So he said, all right, the boy went. And the boy came back a little later. But what the father didn't realize was that there was a picture of a man on one side of the puzzle and then the world. So what the son did, he could easily put the man together. And he came back and he asked him how he did. He said, well, Dad, on the other side was a picture of a man. So when I put the man together, then the world was together. So that's part of our problem is conversion. We have many people, and I say this with tongue in cheek because one of the finest men I have ever met is over there. He was a professor at Stetson University. But we find people who say they've been converted, and yet they cannot sit down and talk with you about issues and things. They don't have but one thing they're concerned about, and that one lies in terms of abortion. But other than that, there's nothing else that matters.
Yeah.
Now, in my family right now, and if they asked me 20 more years ago, I wouldn't believe it. My son, one of my sons was married to a white woman, and my nephew married to a white woman. But racism is so embedded, and I say this most time, a person was white longer than they were Christian. So when they react to things, they react more to the community.
Yeah.
And that they got to maintain an identity with.
Well, we see that's right. Paul's epistle to Philemon is it's a letter about racism.
Right.
Because Philemon and his culture was older than Philemon's walk with Christ.
Right.
So he looked at Onesimus as a slave, and Paul is saying, no, you have to look at him as a brother. So I understand that. I wonder, though, as the pastor of a white community, how to invite people to explore their own hearts and acknowledge that often their behavior in an environment or in a circumstance is driven by an issue rather than driven by Christ who dwells in them.
Well, I went to a white church and nobody in that church said one word to me. when it was over, the minister came up to me and offered me his card, which had a calendar on it. But no one in that church said hello or nothing. Do not even speak to me. And I wonder, how can you have a church where nobody speaks to you and you call yourself a church? And that brings me to how I got to Stetson University. They had an extension course from Stetson on comparative religion, and in one of the well-established churches in Jacksonville. So I said, well, I'm going to go over and take the course. And my wife said, you don't know about that. So I called the lady and I told her, I said, do you have any space? And she said, oh, yes, but she did not detect that I was black. So when I went over that night while they was registering, she saw me and she said to me, we didn't make any arrangements for you. And I said, well, ma'am, I didn't come to spend the night. I just came to take the course. And she would not let me register in comparative religion. I contacted Stetson University and related my incident to them. And I started commuting from Jacksonville weekly and taking a course in religion at Stetson. And these are all white matured ministers, and they did not accept me. They would not accept me until maybe after about 6 weeks. One of them said to me, be careful on your way back home. And that's how I got to Stetson, and I finally stayed with commuting weekly 165 miles. And I fulfilled my residential requirements and got my master's degree there. But even with the ministers there, I had problem accepting me as another minister. And of course, the University, Stetson at that time, I was the first black ministerial student then.
So this still brings me back to, the Bishop's Committee to Combat Racism. What is the most effective way that the church can change its own behavior? How do we speak into that because we've got to change our own house before we talk to anybody else about their house?
Well, it's something that's going to have to be internalized, and you're going to have to recognize it for what it is. There are a lot of people who just do not understand that they are prejudiced and that there's racism in it. And no one likes to admit that they have some problems in their attitudes and behavior. Seeing a black white couple, they got problems. I mean, they get, and that is, they don't know that they have problems.
Exactly.
And if you don't understand them when you have a problem, you can't deal with it. And nobody wants to be told that they're racist. But I don't want to tell you that. All I want you to do is look at your own behavior and how you react to things. So that's where it began. And the nature of prejudice, I had a book here and a very famous author. That's the only thing about it, having so many, you don't know where you put stuff. But I wanted to give that one to you. And
Oh, I've read this book.
yeah, do you have a copy?
I do not have a copy, but I have read it.
Please take that one.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of people do not know that they are.
Yeah.
So how can you deal with something that you feel that you have long passed?
So let me just try to circle around here a bit. You mentioned that one of your sons is married to a Caucasian woman.
Right.
What was your initial reaction when he told you that they were dating and thinking about getting married?
I was against it, but I recognized one thing. When I came along, if you looked at a white woman, you could get hung.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So, and what I did not want to do is let my old pattern and behavior and all that be a part of his life. And when we moved here to Tallahassee and he started going to Episcopal high, Holy Comforter.
Oh, did he go to Holy Comforter?
He went to Holy Comforter. And one or maybe two or three students there. But his world was quite different from mine.
That's right.
And when he went to high school, it was completely different again. So I could not let my experience dictate his life.
Yeah.
So I just kind of left that alone and let him make his own choice. But personally, I saw something that was not a part of my past. If I was not permitted to go to lunch with a white person. I couldn't go to lunch.
I guess when you said a few moments ago that we need to look within to see the racism, this is one of the questions that I would be prone to ask. What if your child came home with the same and announced that they were in love with someone of the same sex? What if your child came home and said they were in love with someone of a different race? That begins when we're honest. Our immediate heart reaction begins to tell us what we really think.
Right.
And it's only when it gets that intimate and personal do we begin to realize maybe I need to change. I remember the story of a friend whose brother couldn't have children, and they adopted a black child, and the ripple of discontent that caused in the family for the longest time, because they too were from the South and they had their races and lines clearly marked. I guess the struggle I have as a leader is how proactive do you become with any other flag than the cross, except in specific cases. So if there were, as there have been, blatant racism in environments in which I'm responsible as a pastor, I feel the need to speak into those circumstances as Christ would. This is not Christian behavior when you're being this racist. This is not Christian behavior when you're being this, socially exclusive to people of different genders. This is not Christian behavior when you are marginalizing people because of their sexuality. But the sphere of my influence is the parish.
Right.
And I think that if I can change one or two hearts in the parish, that will go longer. That will serve the kingdom of God more than me marching in a Black Lives Matter or a gay parade. Does that make any sense to you?
It does. But what you're saying, many ministers won't even touch, even within their own parish, because they feel they do not have the influence with the church to make a difference.
Yeah.
And they are afraid. They want to stay at that particular parish for at least until I can retire. But many, unlike the black ministry, many white ministers serve at the pleasure of members of that congregation.
Yeah.
And they're not going to step outside of what they feel their comfort zone, racially or whatever, and because they want to stay there. And I feel sometimes a deep sense of regret for ministers, for white ministers who got to deal with a man who's president of the bank and has more influence in their congregation than he has.
Yeah.
As minister.
Yeah, that can be a very, very awkward place to be.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you don't, do I speak the truth and risk offending, so they take their checkbook and their families and leave, or do I speak the truth because the truth needs to be spoken?
Yes. Right here in Quincy, I don't know, they were trying to get casino gambling. And I tried to get the white ministers' brotherhood there to speak out against it, but I couldn't. And when they voted on whether to bring casino gambling to Quincy, the voting places were set up in the church. And I could not get, and I had one of my things saying, vote no, right. I could not get the white ministers, nor black ministers as well, to vote no. And that's where they came to vote, and we was defeated. But see, a lot of people do not know casino gambling, you are attracting other people. It's just not the casino, but prostitution and other stuff comes in with it. And but I could not get the white ministers to come out fully and say no. And it was being generated right here in Tallahassee, and I could not get ministers here in the Tallahassee community to support me on that issue.
We're a complicated mess, we human beings.
Yes.
And we all bring baggage.
I know I have mine.
And I have mine.
Yeah. And I try to get this brutality issue, and I can't breathe. I fought this same issue 30 years ago in Jacksonville.
Yeah. But if we're attempting to, we can legislate against some things. We can legislate about no chokeholds.
Yeah.
But the police officer in Daytona Beach, the sheriff in Daytona Beach, who's adopted the Scottish approach to policing, where they engage in conversation rather than engage in any acts of violence, so the gun doesn't come out, it's a conversation, is seeing remarkable effects. And maybe what we need to do for a season is to really evaluate who we hire as police.
Well, that's it. That's it. It's in the initial selection process. That's where the problem is. Yeah. Most of the police officers hired in Jacksonville came from South Georgia and North Florida, and they had to be big enough to slap them down or kick them down. And we didn't deal too much with this, and we found out that we were bringing people in who had no sense of persons. We made, that's what we made our we made the problem. And I would ask a question as a member of the selection board: have you ever been out with a black person? And some of them, well, the newspaper took a Scriven trying to want to know whether you have dated. No, I want to know whether a man have had any relationship with people other than his own race. And then we would know how to teach him to be a policeman. And once we start having confrontation, you don't need to pull out a gun. I weighed 160 pounds wet when I went on the force. And my purpose was, the gun that I had was for the public protection, not for mine. Yeah. And we would have shootings, and all of it started because the policeman didn't know how to handle himself. Just like in Atlanta, that was most needless thing. You got the man's license, you got his car, let him run. You can pick him up later, you don't need it. But what we were always taught is using force. And we had some situations where the policemen started the rioting themselves by shooting a kid in the back, and then throwing a knife down by him. And one of the things we did in the police academy, somebody would tell you, now you always carry a drop knife or a drop gun with you, because if you make a mistake, you can cover it up. Doctors, when they make mistakes, they bury them. They say, oh yes, the surgery was a success, the operation, but the patient died. And they say, well, how do you reconcile? You know, it was other complications, but wasn't nothing wrong with the surgery. Well, my cousin died. The doctor did not check her shot to know that she was allergic to penicillin. So what happened? They gave her penicillin and she died. And everything else went fine. What you mean? How can you have a successful operation and the patient died? But one of the things that we did, and I regret it, we had one of the biggest riots in Jacksonville, but the police officer, he shot the kid in the back, and another one came up on the scene and later threw a knife down, and people rioting all over the city. And I'm riding with this officer, and I knew he was wrong. But what can you do?
Yeah.
And I could not stand up and say, hey, that knife you found by that kid, it was planted. I would have to leave.
Yeah. So it seems to me, though, that all this experience you've had has one of the things that I hear is that you seem to be always willing to speak the truth.
Oh yeah.
You call out the bad behavior.
I did.
And I think
I almost paid with my life for that.
Well, I'm sure that you've been put in a lot of situations, because I can't fathom, a man of your age in the South, of your color, not having been put in a lot of circumstances, and that's heartbreaking to me. But your willingness and your courage to speak the truth rather than toe the line is the only way people are going to start looking into their own hearts, is when they hear the mirror of truth.
Well, my conversion Christ and made a difference in my life. and I never feared for my life, but I had to speak the truth and do what I felt was the right thing to do. And I'm still here.
Well, and I'm glad you are. This is going to be the first of many conversations, Charles. I know that right now.